Hey writers, you're listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we bring you insights and inspiration for growing your self-publishing business. We're your hosts. I'm Rachel, author engagement manager at Kobo Writing Life.
And I'm Laura, also author engagement manager at Kobo Writing Life. Today we spoke to Sacha Black, who is a best-selling and competition-winning author, rebel podcaster, speaker, and casual rule breaker. She writes writing craft books for authors and spicy sapphic fantasy romance as Ruby Roe. She lives in Cambridgeshire, England with her wife and genius giant of a son.
We had so much fun talking to Sacha, to the point where we actually had to take a break because we were laughing so hard. We spoke to Sacha about her entire trajectory and career as an indie author, starting out writing craft books, hosting her Rebel Author podcast, and how she shifted into writing spicy, sapphic fantasy, what she's learned about writing spicy scenes, how she made that transition into working in the fiction space, and how she uses TikTok in her marketing. We really covered it all, and it was such a fun, insightful conversation, and I think you're really going to enjoy.
Hi, everyone. We're joined today by the lovely Sacha Black to talk all things indie publishing with her. Sacha, can you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you've heard, I am Sacha Black. I am the host of the Rebel Author podcast. And as Sacha, I write a lot of snarky, naughty, sweary writing craft books for authors, specifically more on the craft side than the marketing and kind of business side. And then my fiction persona is Ruby Roe, and I write very spicy lesbian fantasy romance. And I'm a Brit. I'm very British, deeply British. And yeah, I love Kobo. What else can I say?
I will say extremely spicy lesbian romance and the archetype Brit. I wouldn't say that that's the stereotype.
I know, right? It's very unexpected turn of events, but I always was a rebel, so.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the indie author space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in a corporate day job. I graduated from university and very sensibly went and got a very conservative job outside of uni on one of these graduate management fast track schemes. Learned within 6 months that this was a big mistake. So I did what any self-respecting millennial did back then, which was to drink wine and blog anonymously under a pseudonym, which happened to be Sacha Black. And so mostly I was ranting about corporate, insert rude word here. And I realized that people laughed at the stuff I was saying, which of course I loved. So I continued writing, and then fell into flash fiction and the sort of flash fiction community in the blog back then, and then dug out some of my childhood notebooks because I was always writing stories. I only stopped when I went to university because I was studying psychology, because I was told to get a proper degree and a proper job. So I did what I was told. And then, yeah, basically that flash fiction led to a NaNoWriMo, so National Novel Writing Month. And I wrote every day. I wrote 52,000 words and I haven't stopped. And that literally was the beginning of the journey. And I listened to podcasts like Joanna Penn, all of the ones that have been around forever. And I knew, I always knew I was going to indie publish because of Joe. So yeah, that was my career. I basically started writing and publishing. The first thing I ever did was publish a nonfiction book about writing, which is a lot of people have issues with people who do that. But what I'd done was share a lot of the lessons, like the craft lessons that I had personally learned on my website, some of which went viral because blogs could do that back then. And I was like, oh, okay, people are really interested in this. They found it really useful. So I compiled it all, turned it into a book, and very naively thought, I'll just publish it. So I did. And it sold, not enough to pay the mortgage, but it sold enough for me to go, oh, hang on a second, I can make some money here. So I continued doing that, writing like young adult fiction at the same time. Like, how many indies start in young adult? It's actually embarrassing. It is actually embarrassing. It's such a cliche. But anyway, that's what I did. And the funny thing is, it was straight as well. Like, I was writing straight young adult fantasy, and I just like I don't know why I was doing that because I had done everything that I was told to do up to that point in my life. Which is why I'm such a bloody rebel now. But yeah, and then I had this giant like epiphany moment when I discovered sapphic books, and I happened to read Katie Robert, who's been on your podcast. I read Queen Takes Rose, and everything changed. And I was like, oh, this is what I have been missing. Like, where have these books been? And that was it. That was literally it. I was on a mission then. So I stopped everything and threw everything into writing the lesbian fantasy romance, especially because there were about four books and about 2 authors that were doing it. And I was like, oh, this is a huge hole in the market, because all of the fantasy is young adult, like for lesbians or for sapphic women. It's all young adult. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to change that. So I did. And now I'm, just doing that full time because I literally can't do anything else. So yeah.
So I definitely want to dive into the adventure into the sapphic fantasy realm. But first, just like still looking at the big picture of your career, at what point were you like, okay, I can do this full time. I can dedicate my life to authorship?
Well, if you ask me financially when that was, probably August last year. If you ask me when I actually did it, it was May the 1st, 2019 was the day I left my day job. So I'd quit 2 months prior to that, right around my birthday, funnily enough, in March. But what I'd done was I'd spent 3 years paying off all my debt, all my student loans, my car loan, the fertility debt we'd gotten into, paid everything off, so that I needed as little money as possible, because I knew lots of people love their day jobs and write alongside their day jobs, and that is great, but I was literally miserable, and I apparently have a problem with authority. So I had to get out, and I took a freelance role, and I took some back then I did some virtual assistant work and just picked up anything that I possibly could and halved my income and quit with no idea whether or not I was going to survive the first year. But I had no debt. So I was like, well, as long as I can scrape together enough to pay the bills, I'll find a way to make it work. And so that first year was literally just scrambling. And then, of course, we went into the pandemic. And so really, I hadn't even been out of my day job a year before we went into the pandemic. And it was the best and worst thing that ever happened. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't really know that I could do it. But what happened was I had nothing to lose. And that's why I dived into the Ruby Roe stuff, because I was spending all my time writing nonfiction, which I love, but I quit my day job to write fiction. So I was like, well, either I'm going to make this work and I'm going to try, or I just need to stop and find something else to do, because it wasn't really a sustainable position to be in. I mean, I was surviving, but not much more. So then obviously I wrote all the Ruby books, and then TikTok happened and exploded everything. And now I'm in a very different position. All praise TikTok.
You've mentioned being a rebel a few times, and you also mentioned that you listen to a lot of podcasts about becoming an indie author and about indie publishing, but you have your own podcast, the Rebel Author Podcast. I'm so curious how that came about and just how it has taken off.
So it happened because I got told that people liked my British voice. And as a kid, I had done some voiceover acting. And I was like, okay, I could do that. But I really don't like phone calls. So I don't really know what possessed me, to be perfectly honest. But because I was so focused on nonfiction at the time, it felt like the right thing to do to kind of help me build up this platform. Obviously, podcast was growing, audio was doubling in listenership every single year. And because I love listening to podcasts and I love audio, it felt like the right fit. And then when these people, I was at a couple of conferences, and both conferences I'd gotten told, oh, we love listening to you, Laura, because I'd been on a few podcasts and things. And it was just the encouragement that I needed. And now I love it for entirely different reasons, because I get to network and I get to meet amazing people and I get to learn stuff. And, I have then met people in person who I've interviewed, and it's been wonderful and been the foundation creation of friendships, but also a way for me to give back to the community. Especially at the moment, because I'm so focused on the fiction, I'm still able to generate and create content that people can learn from. So I kind of love it for multiple reasons.
You mentioned things you've learned through the podcast. What's one thing you've kind of uncovered about that's helped your indie business through interviewing people on the podcast?
Yeah, no question. The biggest thing that's had an impact on me is Clifton Strengths and Becca Syme. She literally changed my life. So I met my strengths coach through Becca. So I work with another lady that's not in her system now, but I have learned so much about myself. I went from writing on average 1,700 words in a working day to being able to write 2,500 words an hour because of strengths. Yeah.
I know this is an audio only medium, but like the way mine and Laura's eyes widened and jaws dropped when you said that, that's wild.
It is wild. And it was literally like a change in my process. It was unbelievable.
And the Clifton Strengths is such a personal call out when you do it the first time. Like I got my strengths and it was just like I was red to filth.
Oh, so what are your strengths?
All I can remember off the top of my head is my top one is empathy.
Okay.
Which explains a lot about who I am as a person.
Okay. Have you done yours as well or not?
No, I haven't done mine yet, but we did. We were at the Toronto Indie Author Conference last month, and we listened to Becca Syme talk, and we were like, oh, okay, we learned just so much just from like listening to one of her presentations. So I can just imagine like how helpful it would be to take her courses for sure. She has like, so much wisdom.
Yeah, seriously, so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much generosity in what she shares. Like she's actually incredible. And I got to have dinner with her in Vegas last year, and she's just as incredible in person as well. I actually love her. But yeah, I mean, she's changed my life. I've met so many friends. I understand myself. I have so much more tolerance for people these days who don't have the same strengths as me, because I can see and understand motivation and behavior. So super useful.
It's so cool. And I do feel like it's maybe a millennial trait because we grew up taking ridiculous quizzes in like teen magazines that we just want to know these things about ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. My number one strength is competition. So that says a lot about me.
I love that for you. Yeah. I never want to play a board game against you though.
No, do you know what? It's fine because I'm always like, are we playing for fun or are we playing to win? Because that's going to depend on which version of me you're going to get.
Okay, if we ever cross paths in the real world, we're Mario Kart. It's on.
Okay. Yes. Oh my God, that's like my fave. I will totally Mario Kart. We'll do it for funsies though, right? Because sure. I don't want to bring that side of me out.
We'll start for fun. We'll see where it takes us.
Okay.
Now, one thing I really want to ask you about is the Rebel Author brand, and just like this is a very strong brand of yours. And I'm so curious how you've managed to maintain this, and if you have any advice for authors who are looking to create that like long lasting brand of their own.
To find the thing that is most them, right? So it's hard to even talk about, but you know, your greatest weakness is your greatest strength, or your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. And I think the thing that we can do is to be most ourselves. And so I probably wasn't myself as a child for a number of different reasons. I didn't necessarily get that space to do that. I certainly didn't come out properly until I was slightly older, and I was in a less conservative area. I lived in sort of very British conservative countryside, so it wasn't really the space to be yourself in that way. And so then as a sort of later teen and adult, I cut all my hair off. I took 2 feet of hair off at university. I wasn't ever allowed really to go to the hairdresser because I had such pretty hair. So, and I get it, like I get what my mum was saying, but also I needed to cut it off. So I cut it off. She cried. Oops. So I went to university and kind of started rebelling. And that is like my journey. My journey is the rebelling to find myself. And I think because it's so authentic and because that is what I continually strive to do. Like, I didn't really know myself very well. It's only through coaching, Clifton Strengths Therapy, that I've kind of worked out who I am. And I've had to rebel against a lot of either societal constructs or, familial ones or whatever, these things that friends, people, family, those who love you tell you because they love you. And I've had to remake me into the person I actually am. And that is a whole long string of rebellion. And it's not just that. I think rebellion goes across I think indies in general are rebellious because we are rebelling against gatekeepers who dictate, what we can and can't publish. And also, like, I'm quite cheeky, quite naughty. I'll say the thing just to antagonize people and get a rise out of them. And I'm the one who will probably encourage you to do the thing that would get you arrested, if I'm perfectly honest. So, but also the other thing in this journey of the podcast, the other thing that I've learned about rebellion is that at the heart of it, it's joy seeking. We rebel because there's something that we don't like, something that we want to change. And usually we're changing it in order to seek joy or happiness for ourselves. And so that's why I love it, because there's nothing greater in this world. Like, life is way too short. You have to seek joy. So, yeah.
I love that. Life is way too short. You have to seek joy. It's a great pull quote. Thank you for that. So I'm really curious. You have this very strong rebel author brand. What made you decide to write the sapphic fantasy under a pen name?
I questioned that after I did it, because they do align more closely in tone than I probably realized when I made the choice. In terms of like hard facts and like data, I did it to keep the metadata clean. The other reason I did it is because I wanted a clean break and a chance to do this fresh. I wanted to know, and I kept it secret for a really long time, I wanted to know if you could publish fresh in 2023 and still make it. Could you still make money as a brand new author in 2023? Because I don't really like it when people moan and whine and, oh, I can't do it, it's so hard. You've been in the game since 2017. I'm like, yeah, I have. But you know what else I did is I started again in 2023 and I still did it. So yeah, that was another thing. It was a little bit of that rebellion and that need to like prove people wrong, especially because I'd been told that adult lesbian fantasy wouldn't sell. So I was like, ha, 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 watch me. And that's it. You only need to tell me I can't do it. That's the competition coming out, right? And then I'm like, watch me make it sell. So for all those reasons, one, I wanted to keep it secret. Two, it was because it was lesbian and I am a queer woman, it felt like, obviously we don't write our experiences into the books, but it was something that was closer to my heart than anything else I'd written. And so I felt a little bit more vulnerable doing it. And so I wanted to do it in private. I wanted to just write the first book in complete secret. So the only way I could do that was under a different pen name, because Sacha is in the indie community, at least it's a known name. So there was just a multitude of reasons. And then my stepdad had a bit of a joke. So my stepdad's surname is Roe. That's that. And he was the one who was like, look, sex sells, you should just try. So I did. And I was like, I will do it if and only if I can steal your surname. And he was like, oh, go on then, thinking I wouldn't actually. And I bloody well did. So now we have a big joke in the family that the only reason I'm selling books is because of his surname.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Have you found it difficult to balance the Sacha brand and the Ruby Roe brand?
Yes, extremely difficult. I wouldn't say I'm balancing it very well. So I've put a pause on writing nonfiction, but I haven't put a pause on teaching classes, speaking at conferences, and running webinars. So basically what I've had to do is prioritize like higher end products. So I will do a webinar that I charge for. I will attend a conference if I can do affiliate marketing. But because Ruby pays like so much more money financially, I cannot, it's like the 80-20 rule, right? Ruby has to have 80 or more % of my time, and Sacha at the moment can only have 20 or less percent. And it literally comes down to like the finances at the moment, really. And also because I'm in this period of huge growth and also learning so much more about marketing because of TikTok, learning about business structures when you earn more money, tax, things like this. I also feel like I have to complete that learning in order to then be able to give back more. So when I come back, it might be that I do a business book or a marketing book for authors instead of just craft. Or it might be that I do a crafty one on tropes or something like that. I don't know. But I don't feel like I can write nonfiction at the moment when I am in like every single day I'm learning new stuff at the moment.
And when did you decide to reveal that you were Ruby Roe? Because even on your Sacha Black website, it still says writes under a super secret pen name, which made me be like, oh my God, is she going to let us talk about this?
So thanks for that. I'm going to email my virtual assistant and I'm going to let them know. No, yeah, I completely forgot about that. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that I revealed it close to launch. So I had sent the book off to the editor, and it was the moment of releasing the book to the editor when I was like, no, I know I'm done. I can't do any more on this book, that I felt free enough to push it off. I really wanted a clean break though. And I made, it wasn't a mistake, but I did tell kind of my Sacha audience a little bit before the launch. And what happened is they're amazing people. So they went and pre-ordered the book and I adore them for that. But what happened is my also broughts got populated with the wrong books. So I had to spend a little bit of money on ads to rectify that. And thankfully I caught it quick enough that it only took me a week to get it shifted. And I've not had that problem again since. But this is another reason why people should do pen names, because if you populate the wrong books in your also broughts, the different stores think that your book doesn't convert. And so no organic traffic goes there. So, it was a gift and I was very grateful, but also you learn a lot of lessons about traffic and conversion and when to release bits of information if you are lucky enough to have a platform.
And as the series has continued and you've released more books, or series is plural, have you noticed a lot of crossover? Because like you kind of mentioned, lesbian fantasy romance is more of a niche market than writing about craft.
No, what I've realized is that there was a little bit of crossover with a Kickstarter that I ran. And I'm not sure if that's because people were looking to model it or they were looking just to see what I'd done, like as from a indie supporting indie perspective or what. But there were a few Kickstarter supporters that came from Sacha, I believe. I mean, we're probably talking about 1 or 2% of my Sacha people reading the Ruby stuff. It is an extremely different audience and they do not behave the same. And I know we always talk about that as authors, but I think until you have an established audience in both grounds, it's actually, I didn't really understand quite how different the audiences do behave, but they really, really do. I thought, yeah, but actually, writers really, really are not your fiction audience at all. Yeah, so I can't even remember what the question was, but no, there's not that much crossover at all.
And what was it like kind of diving into the steamy side with Ruby's books? Was it an adjustment to write that kind of story, or were you kind of like, okay, no, this is what I'm meant to be writing?
Let me tell you, it was like I was unleashed. Oh my goodness me. It is my favorite bit without exception to write. I love it. I'm having a whale of a time. And the funny thing is one of my readers tabs all the spicy scenes. And what I did was I wrote 5 in the first book. And then there was 7 in the second, 9 in the third, and 11 in the one that's just been published. And I was like, oh my goodness me, like how, like I did not know that I had done that, but also wicked. And I think it just shows my evolution with how comfortable I have gotten with writing the spice. Like I love it. It is without doubt, my best days are the days where I write the spice. I honestly, genuinely have thought about writing erotica because I love it so much. But also, I am a die-hard fantasy reader, and so I don't think I could ever write a book that doesn't have any story or plot. Not that erotica doesn't have any, that's not true. I've read some, it's amazing. But obviously the ratio is like 80-20 spice plot. So yeah, what was it like? It was amazing. I literally got unleashed and now I'm like the animal and I can't be stopped. And I'm so happy. It's the best fun ever.
So you've added more spicy scenes throughout the series. What have you learned about crafting a compelling sex scene?
That you need to make sure that the spicy scene does something for the emotional arc of the characters. That's really important. You can have spice for spice's sake, but if you do too much of it, it does become gratuitous. And generally speaking, you do need to have some kind of emotion behind it. Also, I think quite a lot of us don't put enough conflict even in a spicy scene. Like you can put a lot of conflict into a spice scene and it almost deepens it and makes it work really, really well. Yeah, I mean, I have learned I really enjoy writing, different types of spice. That's another thing I've learned. And also that it's easier than you think if you just give yourself that grace and space and get comfortable using the words, because readers want to read the words. And also that there is spice for everybody. Like, even if you think, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, you go into some of the Facebook groups of spicy readers and you can get recommendations for anything. And I think it just proves that niche is king or queen, whichever way around you want to say that. Niche really is important, because if you deliver what they want in that niche, which is what I'm trying to do with the sapphic fiction, and really deliver, you just build forever fans, and that's amazing. I just love it. It is my favorite thing. Don't know if I've mentioned that. Also, I read loads of it. There are so many more books now.
Yeah, well, that's perfect, because towards the end of this episode, we are going to be asking for recommendations. So that's great. But you mentioned that you're filling like what was a large hole in the genre of sapphic fantasy, especially adult, because like I've also read a lot of YA, not a lot of adult, or there wasn't a lot of adult, I should say. What has the feedback been like as you offer these books to the adult lesbian fantasy readers?
I have been fascinated to watch trends. So I thought that because the majority of, so look, there is lesbian fiction out there is, and there's spicy lesbian fiction out there, but it's all contemporary, so it's all set in the real world, and a lot of it has, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it's not sweet, but it's also not like, you look at some of the books like Haunting Adeline and some of the mafia romances and some of the darker stuff, and there isn't anything like that really on the market for sapphic readers, which is exactly why I wanted to deliver that. I don't write as dark as Haunting Adeline. What I do is I love morally grey characters in healthy relationships. But even still, like, a lot of readers will classify my books as dark because the characters are like risky. And so for me, it's been very interesting to watch the trends, because I did 5 scenes in that first book thinking, people might not like this. This is a bit, there's not much of this on the market. This is either going to fall on its body or it's going to fly. And the response was incredible. And all it did was encourage me. It's just why we got to the last book and there was 11 scenes in it. I have to admit, I have lowered it for this book too, purely because I actually had to tell some story. But yeah, what is interesting is to watch how adult sapphic readers behave, because we're in this supply, the supply demand world, there is not enough supply for the demand. So I am almost at the point that indie authors say 2013 to 2017 were in, where it was like the gold rush and you could almost write whatever you want and put it into the market and it will sell. And as long as you are delivering to trope, more or less to trend, which is why I'm doing fantasy romance and kind of paranormal, then you'll be okay. And I did not expect the dark bit of my work to appeal as much as it is, but the darker I write, the more people go feral for it. So yeah, it's I've learned quite a lot.
Now, this might be kind of like, I don't know if existential is the right word, but like a really big picture, weird question. But do you think that, like, I've noticed a boom in especially trad publishing of sapphic romances coming out. But like you mentioned, they're all like very sweet, even if they are spicy, but very sweet contemporary romances. Do you think there's fear of allowing queer characters to be morally gray and dark that's holding back the publishing world from exploring this genre?
Yeah, probably. Maybe a fear of being cancelled, or, because the other thing that I think is difficult is a lot of not all of them, some of the people publishing queer young adult books or queer books through traditional publishing are not themselves queer, or they are not openly queer. They might well be queer, and we cannot ask them to come out of the closet just because we want validation and verification. But it does cause a problem when we have come through a culture of, own voices. I know that's not the word we use now, and Me Too, and this feminist rising and down with the patriarchy and all the rest of it, where people are afraid. However, I think if you are queer and you can write from a place of authenticity, I think it's really important. That said, I got called out and by somebody who's got a very large platform who didn't like one particular word for a region of the body that begins with P on a woman, and basically said that I didn't represent lesbians and stuff. So, even people can still take an issue with you, even if you are queer and you're writing this stuff. And basically, I've lived over half my life as a queer woman, and so even though I don't, represent my life in these books because it's fantasy and all the rest of it, I write from a place of experience. And I think that helps, because 99.9% of the people who read my books turn around and say, oh my God, I've never felt so seen in all my life. Even if you're writing these ridiculous assassins doing a heist it's not the point, right? It's the little things, like somebody shaving their hair, right? Shaving the sides of their hair. And the way that I described that experience, I had a reader email me and say, this was my experience. I felt so seen. And so it was such a life affirming experience when I had that. And, that was a trend in queer culture, right? A lot of lesbians had long hair on the top and shaved on the sides. And so that's why I could do that, because some of us are a cliche and some of us had that hairstyle for a while, right? So, it's those little things, or like using particular words, which I won't share on here, but there's, somebody wears something out in a nightclub and the phrasing that I used is something that is relevant to queer culture. And I had readers email me and say, I do that. Thank you for putting that in the book. And so, I think it's those little things sometimes that can be missed if you don't live that experience. But again, my queer experience is not anybody else's queer experience. So I can only write from my life and my hurts and my joys and all the rest of it. And I can't, so I just do the best job I can do, basically, whilst enabling us to also have dark, morally grey book girlfriends, because that's what I wanted when I wrote, because I was sick and tired of being like, oh my God, this book boyfriend's amazing. It only had boobs, like, so that's why I write. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but I've said it. Oh dear.
You kind of answered this question, but I can ask it anyways. Do you ever feel pressure to represent the entire community in your work, or are you able to take that step back and be like, I can only speak from my own experience?
Yeah, I think I had a moment of doubt when I first started. And so that really rocked me for a little while, because I was like, oh my God, am I doing it wrong? Have I written bad stuff? And then I kind of remembered all of the readers who have emailed, all of the copies that I sold, and the people who tagged me on Instagram, like, thank you so much, this, that, and the other. And you actually have to get things in perspective. One person's opinion is not the world's opinion, even if it feels like it at the time. And I try very hard to remember that I have not had all of the experiences in the world. I have not, had homophobic experiences, even like my wife's had a much worse experience than I have. And so I can only represent what I can represent. And I think if we remember that, and also we do our research. So if I were to do something that is outside of my lived experience, then I would do research and get a sensitivity reader and all of the rest of it. And we just have to do the best that we can. And I think if we do it authentically and genuinely from a place of trying to give back to the community, then I don't, people can just be quiet if they've got a problem with it, you know.
You talked a little bit about hearing from the romance community about the different types of niches that they like and tropes. Have you kind of taken advantage of that in your marketing?
Yes. So I spend a lot of time on TikTok. And so here's the thing. I wrote House of Crimson Hearts with TikTok in mind. And there's a couple of scenes in House of Crimson Hearts that I use and reuse and use over and over again on TikTok, because not every time, but I've probably had 4 or 5 videos get several 100,000 views using these same hooks. But even that has taught me a lesson that actually I'm going to start by writing TikTok hooks next time when I start my new series. And then I'm going to write the book around the hooks, because at the moment, whilst TikTok is still everywhere all over the world, you might as well take advantage of it. So in terms of like, do I take advantage of the tropes? Yeah, I mean, I have gone so far as to literally make tropes up. Like grumpy gargoyle is not a trope, but it's a thing, you know. So if you listen to Jennifer Lynn Barnes, when she talks about writing for the id, or Theodora Taylor, who talks about universal fantasies, and there's another couple of ladies who have got books on tropes. I have read them all of them. I have read them, and I basically take a giant foam machine and pump trope foam into my books as hardcore as I possibly can. And then I pull out all of the tropes and I make a bunch up and then just spray them all over social media. So like I now split my tropes, and I have like normal tropes and then spicy tropes. You do have to be a little bit careful with social media and talking about the spicy tropes, but there are ways and means of talking about them. But really what you just need to do is market the bit in the book that appeals the most. So the things that make people swoon, the things that make people sigh, the things that make people hot under the collar and make them blush, right? And then you need to up the ante and make them a little bit more controversial, a little bit more extreme, a little bit more taboo, and then ratchet it up another 10 knots and then put it on social media and into the book, of course, as well. So yeah, I mean, I literally structure my books around the tropes now, because it's the most easy language to communicate in. And, you know, if you want to sell a book to a reader, you want to make sure that you are speaking reader, right? You don't speak to a reader who's English in Spanish and try and sell the book in Spanish, right? You speak in English, and tropes are reader language. So lots of people have a problem with tropes, and I'm like, why would you have a problem? This is how you sell the book. Are you mad? And so, yeah, love me some tropes.
And like you said, TikTok is a big part of readers finding those tropes and kind of discovering what they love through these TikToks. You have a TikTok for the Ruby Roe pen name, which I would say has a pretty big following. Did you have a plan behind your TikTok, or did you kind of jump into it and it took off?
So when I very first started my TikTok, I started it in January 2023. And my plan was to get 1,000 followers before I launched on February the 10th, 2023. And I did it in 3 weeks. And I posted a bunch of stuff, having absolutely zero clue what I was doing. Had a couple of videos get about 30,000 views. I posted a bit more, and then I didn't do anything with it for months. And then I met a chap called Adam Beswick in Seville, and I made a pinky promise to him that I would use TikTok to help me become a 6-figure author by the next 20 books Seville. And I did it. It literally, we took a picture of the pinky promise and I put it on a shirt for him, because we could not believe. And when we did that pinky promise, it was like one of those moments, you know, when you look at somebody and you're like, damn, like this is a moment right now. Like we are having a moment. And he was like, I actually think you're going to do it. And I was like, yeah, I think I am too. And anyway, so then in November, he was like, do you want to trial some coaching? And I was like, sure. So he basically was accountability and forced me to post on TikTok, at which point my competition then kicked in and I started to read the algorithms and I started to look at what other people were doing. I did a lot of analysis. I broke it all down and I worked out how to make it work. December the 10th was the day that changed my life. Also a really important day because it's the same day that my wife and I became the very first civil partnership to translate into a marriage in Hertfordshire. So that day just has like significance for us. But yeah, and my first video went viral, well, micro viral on the 10th of December, 2023. And I have posted consistently 3 to 4 times a day, every day since November the 19th, which was when the coaching started. And everything has happened since then. I think I had like 2,000 followers on November the 19th, and I'm on over 22,000 now in June 24.
Do you have any tips for authors who are looking at TikTok and are really scared to jump into that type of marketing?
Yeah, don't look at anything that's got less than 30,000 views. Like when you go onto TikTok and you want to look at all of the authors, this is what I do. I go onto the top 100, I look at who is selling. If it's and because I spend a lot of time in the top 100 all the time on all the different stores, I always know who is selling what where. So, okay, and that's a hard habit to build. But even if you went onto the stores and looked on that day, you could then go, okay, well, it's Sarah J. Maas, so she's probably not on TikTok, you know? So when you find you try and find the indie authors that are on TikTok and then that are in the top 100, and then you go to TikTok and you look at their profiles, you check to see if they're posting regularly. If they're not posting regularly, ignore them. And then I go and look for their posts that have a lot of views in the last, however long, couple of weeks, month. Because the problem with TikTok at the moment, especially, is that the algorithm's changing a lot more frequently than it used to. So you want to be looking at stuff that is viral at the moment. And then just deconstruct it. Look at the patterns. Try and challenge yourself to find 5 or 6 videos that have, 30,000 views, 100,000 views. And what are the commonalities between them? Take those commonalities out and try and mimic those in a way that would be relevant to your audience. And that is basically the basis of what I do. I just look at what is working and then think about how I can make that work for lesbians.
Trying really hard not to make a stereotypical joke, like just throw a carabiner on it, which a very small percentage of our audience will understand. So speaking of lesbian stereotypes and sapphic books, like I mentioned earlier, we would love to hear some recommendations from you of, it can be sapphic fantasy or just within the genre of lesbian fiction that you have loved recently. This is both for our listeners and for me personally.
So I'm going to give you the names of the authors that I think are the most similar to me. Some I've read, some are on my Kindle to read when we go to New Zealand this summer. So Eden Emery and Elle May. So Eden Emery has the Don't Stop Me series, and Elle May is the same author, basically has other books under that kind of arena. Liza James, and I'm reading Frost right now, so that's like a vampire one. Scarlett King and Nadine O'Keefe, they write sort of more contemporary dark lesbian romance. And then actually, obviously, the one that I'm going to have to recommend is Queen Takes Rose by Katie Robert, because that was the one that changed everything for me. So how can I not recommend that one?
That's a good one. And then everyone else can also listen to her interview with Katie too, because she has some really great advice as well. We talked about tropes a little bit. I'd love to know what your favorite tropes to read are.
Without question, enemies to lovers, chef's kiss. It is like, I will probably spend 80% of my career writing enemies to lovers just because I love it so much. I love Only One Bed. I also love like different lesbian dynamics, so not always femme, like mask femme or butch or whatever. Sorry for people if you don't understand these terms, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I really like books that have different spice in it. That's a good way to describe it. On the more spicy end of spice, hopefully everyone catches my drift. What other things? So Sarah Kate is a great example of that. Her Salacious Players Club, I think it's called. It is straight, but it is chef's kiss, well written. So yeah, I love that. What other things? I love kisses in the rain, waterfalls, mansions and castles. I love a competition and a heist as well. Oh my God. Oh, and twins. Oh my God. If you've got twins in there, I'll probably read it. And also sibling dynamics. So like one of my favorite TV shows at the moment is Succession. It's like my family. It's literally my family, and it's so weird. I've never felt so called out in my life. And my favorite thing to write is sibling dynamics because my siblings are wild.
That is such a solid list of tropes. 10 out of 10.
And grumpy gargoyles, can't forget them. Or talking animals. Sorry, I got to add those two.
We're gonna have to make grumpy gargoyles happen. That's a good one.
And as I am very conscious of the time, before we let you go, where can our listeners find you online?
Okay, well, my Shopify website is rubyroe.co.uk. My stuff for authors can be found on sachablack.co.uk, and that is Sacha with a C, so SACHA, thecolorblack.co.uk. And the podcast is the Rebel Author Podcast, and TikTok is at Ruby Roe Author.
Incredible. We will include links to all of those, your books and your book recs in our show notes. And Sacha, thank you so much for hanging out and chatting with us today. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for having me.
So much fun.
Lovely.
Thank you for listening to the Kobo Writing Life podcast. If you're interested in picking up Sacha's books, we will include links in our show notes. If you're enjoying this podcast, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're looking for more tips on growing your self-publishing business, you can find us at kobowritinglife.com. Be sure to follow us on social media. We are at Kobo Writing Life on Facebook and Twitter, and at kobo.writing.life on Instagram.
This episode was hosted by Laura Granger and Rachel Wharton, with production by Terrence Abrahams. Editing is provided by Kelly Robotham. Our theme music is composed by Tearjerker. And a huge thanks to Sacha Black for being our guest today. If you're ready to start your publishing journey, sign up today at kobo.com/writinglife. Until next time, happy writing and happy pride.